for $50.
Oh my.
That's what they're charging.
And of course, you know his version of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen go out in midday sun. I just got his coffee table book there, and there he is, right on the cover, and it's burnt to a crisp by the sun, as you can imagine. So I didn't realize the song was autobiographical.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a famous record of him standing in Las Vegas with the cup of tea in the desert.
Oh yeah.
You know. He's a man I particularly admire, actually, because he was totally realistic about the theatre. He had this, well, not my ideas, I have his ideas. There's a 90-minute LP recording of him talking about the theatre when he's an old man. And I mean, I play it occasionally, nod my head as I listen to what he has to say. He was a strict believer in the adage that a play can be much, much more than entertainment, but it must never, ever be less. In other words, as he says at the end of the recording, if it's less and I can't follow it, I get bored. I want to go home. End of recording. You know, that's it. And he's right. Artistic self-indulgence is one of the things that is destroying the theatre, not just Canadian theatre, internationally. They said, well, let's do Oedipus. Wouldn't it be fun to do Oedipus Rex on ice? Fun for who? The people in the box office? What about the customers? Sometimes I think it's not a good thing to refer to the audience as such. They are customers, the people who pay. Nobody wants to do a play without people sitting in the auditorium wanting to watch it. Any painter that says he paints pictures to have them shoved upstairs in his garret where only he can see them is a liar.
The time we're talking about, right to the mid-60s, there were really no theatre schools per se. Without talking so much about the post-theatre school
I don't
era,
think...
Would you say there was some advantage to not being educated in the stage?
Well, you know, it's really six of one and half dozen of the other. The National Theatre School has produced some very important people for our arts, and they've produced some dummies. You can hardly blame the National Theatre School for that. That'd be like blaming John Paul II for some bad Catholic you've met. The drama departments of universities that impress me are the University of Alberta, because I had a lot to do with them. Thomas Peacock is not only a fine actor, but a fine teacher. And Gordon Peacock, who was the head of the drama department when I was at the Citadel, was also an excellent teacher and man of the theatre. You had a minister, or he was with the Ministry of Culture in Alberta, Walter Casa. They now have a theatre named after him in Edmonton, the Casa Theatre. He was not only excellent at his job, he was a fine actor. So that, as you can probably tell, Alberta holds a rather special niche in my memories. I think that the drama department there is first rate. The John Abbott College outside of Montreal is a place that impressed me very much. I directed there and taught there. Teachers like, say, Victor Knight, who live in Montreal, a first-rate teacher. Anytime an actor's resume crosses my desk and it has his name on it, I will see the actor because I respect the teacher. One has these preferences. Drama schools as a whole, the thing that they have to be careful about, and I found this watching some of the people in England at the Royal Academy, too many pupils, so that it's hard to give attention. I mean, a class of 30 is not as easy to handle as a class of 10. So, you know, so then you need the class of 30 because you need the money. So it's a catch-22, you know. But I'm not one of those artists that say drama schools don't spoil your kid by saying, no, you carefully learn. I had 2 private teachers, and I owe them so much that, you know, I'll never be able to repay it. Because when I was a young actor, I mean, I was bad. And then you suddenly look back. I mean, when I first played Romeo, and now I'm too old to play it, but I really would like to play it again.
Can I hopscotch over to Joe Schachter and
Joseph. A man who has done so much to promote professional theatre in Alberta and in Edmonton. my first encounter with him, I thought I was talking to James Cagney. Let me ask you a question. He had a cigar. And you talk to him. But underneath it all was a genuine understanding of what the theatre is, a genuine understanding of what the theatre is about. He directed An Enemy of the People, Ibsen's play. And he was the producer always, and kept out of the actual bones of the putting on of the plays. Would come to the opening nights, and they were always rather celebrated in Edmonton. They had the house lighters, which meant it was, I think, $100 a seat or something, which was a lot of money then. The dinner jacketed crowd, you know, the kind you get at opening nights at Stratford. Beautifully dressed women with tiaras, carrying these, pulling these strange people by the sleeve, their husbands, in their tattered jackets and things like. Well, no, they actually wore dinner jackets there. They were not my favorite audience. I liked it when the people followed for the month's run. I'm resisting.
Sorry to hold. Yeah, it's getting a lot of Martha Mann. Obviously, that's competition.
Yeah, but Martha Mann has a reputation, so that you have to build that up. I mean, I once conducted a symphony orchestra, which in Edmonton, the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra. I always say it with great pride to stand there on a podium and conduct.
If I need it, which I don't think I will, because I'm pretty sure we can cram it in. And we've mentioned Gordon Peacock, we mentioned Tom Peacock.
Mm-hmm. That's U of A.
But there was something I wanted to jump back to before we proceed. I mentioned Mavor Moore, but I didn't mention that he generously offered a fairly successful project that was going around at the time called Spring Thaw.
Oh, yeah.
There at the time?
No, all I knew of Spring Thaw was that Andrew always said to me that he had come up with the title. This was debated sometimes. But that's like when they talk about the Shaw Festival and its beginnings in 1963, when Brian Doherty said to me, do you think that we're having tea in his garden, do you think that a festival of plays by Bernard Shaw would go very well? I did an amateur thing last year called Salute to Shaw, and if it failed, we could always salute somebody else. And that was the way he looked at it, and I said, yes, why not? Shaw has a huge repertoire of plays. He wrote, I think, 2 or 3 more than Shakespeare, so he could always say that he had more. Shakespeare wrote, we're told, 39. Shaw, I think, wrote about 43. And always, of course, being Irish, considered himself a better playwright than Shakespeare. But I think that was a bit tongue-in-cheek. I was coaching a friend recently in Shaw's Heartbreak House. And, of course, I started to study the text and read the essays, which he always wrote in front of his plays. And I loved, everybody else seemed to know it, but not me. For about 11 years, when he was trying to make his way as a writer, he was supported by his mother, Lucinda, who taught music in London. And she actually fed him and clothed him and gave him a place in which he could sleep and work for 11 years. So when he was a famous playwright and old, he said, well, I never threw myself into the battle of life. I threw my mother in. Which is a typical Shavian way of thanking this wonderful woman, you know. I threw my mother in. And that was, you know, that's Shaw.
That's behind the scenes support, the kind of people that often don't get thanked at the end.
Oh, yeah. Well, Lucinda Shaw was an extraordinary woman, of course. She would have been a great opera singer if she'd lived at a time when gentlewomen, which she was, were in trade. If you were a gentlewoman, you didn't sing on stage. That's why in the 18th and 19th century they always had Mrs. Kendall, Miss so-and-so, Miss Irene Vanbrugh, because they wanted to tell the audience that these were not women of the street. They're actresses and should be treated as such. You know? That still hangs on even today, this feeling that if women are in the theatre they can't be very, you know, they're no better than they should be. This is rubbish. They don't do it to men, just women. So not only am I a pacifist, I'm a feminist.
Quite a few women actually ran theatres. I mean, the only one that comes to mind right now, obviously the one up in Ottawa, what's her name again? Then there's Martha Allan in Montreal.
Yeah, Norma Springford had a lot to do with it.
Norma Springford?
I knew Norma very well. Yeah, she was a true woman of the theatre, you know. I was directed in Montreal by one of her protégés, Alex Hausvater, who still, I think, works in Montreal, very Romanian, very, I think he's an Israeli actually, very avant-garde, I would say, you know, but not to an extent that I don't understand what he's talking about, which is sometimes what happens to me when I listen to somebody that's really way out there. I can't really follow it, you know.
Christopher Newton. Can you tell me about Christopher Newton and Calgary and Edmonton? These are rival cities in Alberta. I understand that that he was working in Calgary when you were at the Citadel. Is that right?
Yes, that was another strange thing. Of course, I first encountered Christopher when I directed him at the Shaw Festival. A good, very good actor. He was in Village Wooing, which is a very good one-act play in 3 scenes by Bernard Shaw. Then I saw him occasionally when he was in Calgary. He ran Theatre Calgary and I ran the Citadel. One of the things that intrigued me was no matter how hard you try, and it shows it can happen, we would open with the same play without any discussion. I mean, what are the odds against that? I mean, if I was going to open with, say, The Odd Couple by Neil Simon, Calgary's going to do The Odd Couple. And you think, well, it didn't make any difference. There's 200 miles between them, so... We had some subscribers from Calgary, but I don't think they had any Edmonton subscribers. So. But the odds against having the same play in in the season, 200 miles away, without any talking about it. If we sat down and said, "Well, we'll do this," I'll tell you what I did do while I was in Edmonton. There was a wonderful director of radio drama at Calgary, CBC, Fred DL, and it didn't take an Einstein really to figure it out. He would find out from me what the season of plays I was doing, who the actors were, and I could tell him because I always planned things very carefully ahead, and then he would be able to mount these productions without having to fly the people from Montreal or Toronto because they're already in Edmonton. They just drive down the road, which is a big financial difference. And so he did things like Flint, Dialogue, all sorts of plays using people like Gilly Fenwick, Moyer, Francis Highland, because they're already there, you see. That's an example of working together in the trade for the good of the customer, which I think is what we're really about.
Ross Stewart said that you did a lot of radio, television, clubs, social gatherings. You became a sort of a public personality in Edmonton.
Well, this was only because when I arrived there in '68, the attendance was about 40%. When a 300-seat theatre is kind of sad, I turned that into about 104% in one season. And I did that by going out and telling people where they should go. I went to groups ranging from hundreds to 12 parents without partners. That's unmarried mothers with children. There were about 15 of them, I think. I went to talk to them. They all came. Bring the children. Come and see the shows. Then I got to like that very much because, for one thing, it meant that from Monday through Friday of each week, I never had to worry about buying lunch or dinner because I was always speaking somewhere. And people appreciated it very much. At first, they didn't want to know. I mean, seen Mulcahy. He's going to come and talk to us. Who is this? But then, of course, you go and you have a lot of fun. Try not to make a commercial of it. In other words, tell them a few Irish stories, talk about the theatre, what it's like to work in the theatre, and then at the very end say, I'm not a tourist, you know. I want you to do something for me. And they'd all have a brochure of the season by their place. Say, now, you look at those things, and I want you to come and see the plays. It only costs so-and-so, and if you don't like them, come and tell me. I'm responsible. So they say, okay, we'll go. And fill the theatre. Then they come back, of course, because what you do is usually good.
You mentioned earlier the sophistication that the Albertans gained quite quickly from drama, from the theatre that they were spoiled with at the Citadel. But what were they like as an audience person?
I think they were very good, but then I find people are everywhere, provided the play is palatable. I used to find the first night somewhat trying. The dinner jacket crowd, because it became such a social event. It's still rather like that at the opening nights of Stratford, you know. It's where people are there to be seen. You get it here in Toronto, at the Opera Company and so on, you know, the first nights. I can remember being very annoyed at a play I did called Staircase, where somebody shouted in 5 minutes into the second act, "Hey Lou," talking to his wife, I think, Louise, "you're not coming back to the bar?" And there's two actors on the stage talking. And next day I happened to be interviewed on some radio show, and said, "You're very successful and the theatre is full. And is there anything you don't like?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't like last night's audience, the moneyed riffraff that passes for society here in Edmonton." That caused, except for the wife of one of the bank managers who said, "I'm so glad that Mr. Mulcahy has finally said what I have always thought. First nights are ruined by the barbaric behavior of the people who attend." So I came out smelling of roses.
You did mention earlier when the tape
5
stopped.
minutes.
Thank you. That the tiara-clad ladies would lead their husbands in by the sleeve.
Well, that's Stratford. They did. The dress tended to be more dinner jacketed and all that kind of thing in Edmonton. It's kind of a joke, really. I once went to an opening at Stratford and I was amazed at how beautiful the women were, and then these odd men with them, their husbands, in tennis shoes and patches on their sleeves and things like that. But that was just me being funny, you know. I don't really mind what people wear to the theatre as long as they're comfortable. Yeah, and don't get cold. I mean, if you go in shorts and a tennis shirt, you're going to get cold, the air conditioning.
Joe Schachter, who was so helpful, did he not also have traits like stubbornness or whatever that?
Well, we used to have arguments sometimes. I mean, one of the famous arguments, of course, which made the newspapers was over a parking lot behind the theatre where I put my car. And he'd been used to putting his, and so he was very angry that he was always driving up and finding I was there. And I said, "Get your own parking lot. Your office is over at so-and-so." And the paper said, "Mulcahy and Schachter nearly come to blows over a parking space." But that was good for the theatre, you know. Sold tickets.
You said he, before the tape stopped earlier, reminded you of...
Cagney, the actor. Well, yeah, he was kind of pugnacious and, you know, tough-nosed, but he knew that he'd picked the right guy, and and he knew also and agreed that the basic thing was to keep the customers happy, so that they attended his theatre. Well, he was quite unique because for a couple of years he ran the thing without any Canada Council grant of any kind. He didn't want it. Said, "Thank you very much, but I'm doing fine." And then finally, of course, they practically begged him to take grants. And he did. Yeah. So.
Did you ever work with Rupert Kaplan?
Oh, I knew Rupert, yes.
Please tell me all about him.
Well, Rupert was the Mr. Radio in Montreal, and I would only find myself fortunate to be cast in a play by Rupert, and he was very tight with the purse strings. He was a man who realized that you had to watch what you spent. He was the head of radio in Montreal, and he was unique in the sense that he was very friendly with Carlotta O'Neill, the widow of the great American playwright, Eugene O'Neill. So that meant that CBC, that Rupert Kaplan could mount on radio the plays of O'Neill, and did. And I was in some of those. He had a very deep voice, and was a man of the theatre. I liked him. But a lot of people didn't like him. I think it was because he was an autocrat and thought that he was right and this was how the department should go. And who's to argue with that? I mean, the thing is that you'd better hope he's right, because he's the head. It's like having a general in a battle, isn't it? You better hope he knows what he's doing, or you're going to get killed.
Barry Morse, did you...
Sorry, John. Sorry, my mistake. You've got 10 minutes.
Oh, 10 more minutes,
Yeah.
eh? Okay.
And that's it?
Yeah. And
Good.
then
So
we'll just,
ask me some important stuff.
No, basically we're going to follow in now. Barry Morse, were you there at all for the Shaw Festival?
No, I don't know. I think I must have been on my way to Edmonton then, because that came afterwards, the Citadel. He did Don Juan in Hell at the Shaw Festival. I followed that with great interest because I'd played Don Juan, of course, a number of times, and I knew that to have a man of the stature of Morse running a thing like that, it would be in good hands, because one has if you put so much of your life... I followed the course of the Citadel with great interest because I spent 5 years of my life there. I did 7 plays by 5 is what, 35 plays? Let's say they're 3 hours each, and that's a generous estimate. That's 3 by 3. It's nearly less than 100 hours of entertainment for the public. 5 years of your life to give somebody 100 hours of play acting? I remember doing Steinbeck's of Mice and Men at Edmonton, having my first twinge, because it was a very rare operation then. At the Edmonton General Hospital, they were separating what were then called Siamese twins. The operation took 6 hours. There were a team of about a dozen doctors around these two children, and the whole of Alberta, in fact a lot of the world, was focused upon what these doctors were going to do. And I thought, here I am doing a play, rehearsing it on a Sunday while 12 doctors are fighting to save 2 children's lives in the hospital. What am I doing here? But that was the only time I suddenly thought that I should have been in medicine.
You might have been making more money per hour kind of thing. When you accept something and say how much, you obviously in Edmonton didn't count in and factor in the amount of time you'd spent promoting.
Well, no, because there, don't forget, when you're an artistic director, you don't really have to direct anything. I directed a lot, but you don't have to. You're responsible for running the theatre and putting the right people at work. So you have a salary for that, which is an agreed upon sum. So it stopped, but then if you direct a play, which I would do, of course that's a separate salary, or act on the stage, which I would do, that's another contract again. That's all extra. But the running of the thing, if it means, you don't have to go out and speak at a lunch or a dinner. You do that because you want your theatre to be successful, to thrive. At least that's how I look at it. But it's not written anywhere that an artistic director who can be a very talented person at picking the people he uses in his shows has to be Mr. Entertainment, you know, to make jokes and so on. That's a bonus.
Did you profit by any fortuitous coincidences, especially I'm interested in the field of casting? Like, did you ever think, here's a guy I saw somewhere that he was interested in this and I'm doing this play, did much of that happen?
Well, during my time at the Citadel, I would come back, of course, for the summer months because it was a winter operation. So about 4 months of the year I'd be back here in Toronto, see everything, go everywhere. Little places, big places, theatres, go to auditions. Leon Major was a tremendous help to me because he would audition for the St. Lawrence Centre here in Toronto, and he would invite me to come and sit with him. And so I would be watching. And if I saw somebody very good, I would say to myself, oh, please God, don't let Leon book her, because I will. And then I made a joke later which did not amuse Leon when they said, how come you have so many good performers? I said, well, I take everybody that Leon turns down. He said, that's not funny, Sean. But you know, you mustn't take it too seriously. The one thing you must take seriously when you're directing is the rehearsal. That's serious. And you have to treat the actors as people, discuss things with them. That doesn't mean indulging them or allowing them to indulge themselves, but sometimes an actor will come up in rehearsal with a brilliant idea. Something is really a problem, and they come up with a brilliant idea. I look at the actor or actress and say, that's incredible, we'll do it that way. The one thing that troubles me is why the hell I didn't think of it. So, you know, everyone has a laugh, have a coffee, and get on with the job.
Is there such thing as burning out? Like, I saw this interview with Sting, the musician, and he says he does films.
Yeah.
Not because he's a good actor, but because he likes to have a real job, sort of on the side, away from what he does, so that he can return with some real-world experience back to the theatre. Well, did you ever get away from the stage just for that, for example?
No, I don't feel it necessary because that's my work. I've watched Sting on screen. I find his work laudable, highly commendable. But I understand, I don't watch his other work, which is to play, guitar and sing? I can't say that I find that memorable at all. I know him as a film actor and somebody that entertains me because he's good. So, you know, I have a very jaundiced view of some of the people that are very big, like Alice Cooper and so on, you know, in that kind of field. I call that singing through your nose by ear. It's not for me. I mean, I don't like the Rolling Stones, so, you know, and I can't say that I don't like them, I just don't understand them, you know. I'll sometimes hear a delightful, I remember it happening once, a delightful old Irish melody was played at some service or other, you know, in the traditional Irish way. And then to hear somebody next to me say, oh, hey, that's that song by Cat Stevens. And I just looked and said, by who? People think that, you see. These very old melodies.
What other Irishmen in Canada were there in your trade?
In my time, well, there was Shea Duffin. He's in Los Angeles now. He did the famous, it actually began in New Brunswick, I believe, the famous one-man show about Brendan Behan, where you have to have all that four-letter F word at the beginning, otherwise you've got to get that up front, because every other word that I met Behan once in Montreal at the Cafe Roma. What a memory. I was doing a film for the National Film Board in St. Vincent de Paul prison. That's not much fun, because you can't just walk from one cell block to another. You have to, the keys and everything. I was playing a warder, and the inmates were played by real prisoners. Okay, so I have a night out, and I go to have an Italian meal at the Cafe Roma, walk in, and it's red and white checked tablecloths, and a piano halfway down, and the dining area at the back, and standing at the piano is a fat man in a rumpled suit, no teeth in front, singing September song off key. And I look and I think, it's Brendan Behan. He was speaking at McGill University. He was towards the end of his life. And he loved singing, you see. September song off key. He would have put me through the wall. I'm dressed like this, you know. He'd call me a West Briton, not an Irishman. But as I do have one edge, and I knew he spoke it as I went by, I said, Canas tatu of Vuchadin Eving Alling Og, which is a Gaelic greeting. And he turned and says, who are you? And we became firm friends. I knew that I didn't want it, because he'd hit me, you know. I mean, oh sure. He didn't like people who weren't like him. And he was a hard-drinking, very talented. I did his play at the Citadel, The Queer Fellow. 22 men in the cast, no women. There were 11 Canadian-born and 11 Irish-born. And at the student matinees, can you imagine a lineup of 22 men on the stage? And I'd say, okay, my friends, tell me who the Irish-born actors are in this play, because it's set in Mountjoy in Dublin, you see. And they'd say, him, Montreal. Well, he is Ottawa. They never could pick the Irish guys. All over the country. Vancouver. 22 men.
Anyone else come to mind in the Irish mafia of the stage?
Oh, well, there was a term they used to use. Gerard Parks, of course, who lives in Toronto, is a great actor. Not just, I don't want to say Irish actor, he's a great Canadian actor. I toured with him in a play called The Dream. Just things that pop into my mind. We were very good friends. He played Major McLeod, the first commanding officer of what was then the Northwest Mounted Police, before they became the RCMP. And he would announce the scene, you see, and he said, living out here on the Canadian prairies, which is his line, and on opening night he says, living out here on the Canarian Praties. And I come down the dressing room, did I just hear that? The audience didn't notice. But he noticed the Canarian Praties. Happens to actors sometimes, you know. I had an actor at the Shaw Festival look at me every night in John Bull's Other Island, and he was a beautiful actor. And he was talking about how badly he behaved the previous night and how this girl didn't like him because he was drunk. And I'm his friend, and I say, well, perhaps you're exaggerating in her reaction. She says, no, I'm drunk, I was afraid. Instead of I was drunk, I'm afraid. And the stage manager finally said, you know, he's not been saying that line to you. And I said, oh, I know what he's saying. I would just want him to go on for the run until it occurs to himself. And then finally he came to me and said, no, I've been saying that line quite wrongly to you, Sean. I'm drunk, I was afraid. I was drunk, I'm afraid. The audience never knew. I mean, if you were sitting in the audience, you wouldn't know. The guy says, no, Larry, no. I'm drunk, I was afraid. You think you've heard it right, but you haven't. But the way I said to the stage manager, don't tell him. Wait till he finds out. And after 3 weeks, the penny dropped. I've been saying that line quite incorrectly to you. And that's my shore story. That was Paul Craig. I'm sure he wouldn't mind my saying so. He's a beautiful actor. And he played Broadbent in John Bull's Other Island, and he was quite splendid, except for that one line.
I guess if you corrected, I think it would.
30 seconds.
But I had my own trouble with it. In 30 seconds, I can tell you. It's a long part, and he has a 3-page speech right at the top, so it's really tight. I come in, and they're talking. I walk in, and they look at me, and they don't speak. And they look, and they don't speak. And finally, one of them speaks. Then afterwards, I said, why the hell was that long pause? He said, because you're supposed